storm wind that fulfills God's word.
Mountains and hills, fruit trees and cedars, animals and cattle, creeping things and soaring birds.
Earthly rulers and all nations, princes and judges of every land.
Young men and maidens, elders and children.
Let them praise God's name, for God's name is exalted. 144.
המאיר לארץ ולהרים עליך ברחמים ובטובו מחדש בכל יום תמיד מעשה וראשית מה רבו מעשיך אדוני כולם בחוכמה עשיתם על הארץ קנייניך תתברך אדוני אלוהינו על שבח מעשה ידיך ועל מאורי אור שעשית יעפרוך סלע אור סלע.
In love you bring light to the earth and its creatures. Join me. Your goodness renews the creation each day. Infinite, varied, and rich are all your works. Divine artist, all of them wrought with wisdom. The whole earth is teeming with life. Awestruck by the universe, work of your hands, let all life bless you, praise you, and celebrate the beauty of your lights.
אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו. ברוך אתה אדוני, יוצר המאורות.
Amen. 146.
אהבה רבה אהבתנו, אדוני אלוהינו, חמלה גדולה ותרה, חמלת עלינו. בעבור ערבותינו ואמותינו שבטחו בך, ותלמדי חוקי חיים, כן תכוננו ותלמדנו. אבינו האב הרחמן, המרחם רחם עלינו, ותן בליבנו להבין ולהשכיל, לשמוע ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. והאר עינינו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחל לבבינו לאהבה, ויירא את שמך, ולא נבוש ולא ניכלם, ולא ניכשל לעולם הבא.
148.
ויביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו כמימיות לארצנו, כי אל פועל ישועות אתה, ובנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון, מכל עם ולשון, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול, סלע באמת, להודות לך וליחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד.
Feel free to be seated.
Please be seated.
152.
את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך,
והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם להיות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. 153 למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
אדוני אלוהיכם. We are on Michamocha 164.
164.
מי כמוך בעלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה. שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים. יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ויאמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל.
Even if you're at home, if you're able to rise, please do.
וחנומך יהודה וישראל גואלנו. אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
166 is standing prayer, the Amidah.
Adonai sefatai tifach ufi agi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai. Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah. האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, וכותבנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים חיים. זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, וכותבנו החיים, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה.
Amen.
Page 170. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו, איש עיני עבר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומידו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך אל הרחמים, זוכר יצוריו לחיים ברחמים, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל.
Amen. You may be seated. On 173, just a brief teaching by beloved rabbi and teacher of mine, Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be a blessing, Aaron Penkin. Our actions help us to live in such a way that when we suffer life's darkest depredations, we will always have ways of coping with them. Our actions may not change the ultimate outcome one iota, but they alter our attitude, bolster our ability to withstand challenges, help us handle unavoidable misfortunes better, and to see life's value amid chaos and dismay. Continuing with Untitled Chapter on 174.
ובכן ולך תעלה קדושה, כי אתה אלוהינו מלך. ונתן תוקף קדושת היום, כי הוא נורא ואיום. ובוא תינשא מלכותך, ויכון בחסד כיסאך, ותשב עליו באמת.
Let us proclaim the power of this day. Join me.
A day whose holiness awakens deepest awe and inspires highest praise for your dominion. For your throne is a throne of love. Your reign is a reign of truth.
In truth you are judge and plaintiff,
Counselor and witness, you inscribe and seal, you record and count. You remember all that we have forgotten.
And when you open the book of memories,
it speaks for itself.
For every human hand leaves its mark, an imprint like no other.
Chotem Yad Kol Adambo.
176.
ובשופר גדול ייתקע, ייתקע, וכל דממה דקה
Still small voice.
יישמע, ומלאכים יחפזון, וחיל רדה יוחזון, וחיל רדה יוחזון, ויאמרו הנה יום הדין.
Today is the day of judgment.
לבכות על צבא מרום בדין, כי לא יזכו בעיניך בדין בדין.
We may not be blameless.
וכל באי עולם יעברו לפניך כבני מרון, כבני מרון, כבני מרון, כבני מרון.
We're like sheep who pass before God.
כבקרת רועה עדרו, מעביר צאנו תחת שבטו. כבקרת רועה עדרו, מעביר צאנו תחת שבטו. כן תעביר ותספור ותמנה, ותבכות נפש כל חי, ותחתוך כי יצפה לכל בריאה, ותכתוב את גזר דינם.
178.
בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור, וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון. בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור, וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון.
On Rosh Hashanah it is written, on the fast of Yom Kippur it is sealed. Join us. How many will pass away from this world?
How many will be born into it?
Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? And
who will be taken
before
their time?
בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור, וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון. בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור, וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון.
Again together.
Who by fire and who by water, who by war and who by beast, who by famine and who by drought, who by earthquake and who by plague, who by strangling and who by stoning.
בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור, וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון.
בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור, וביום צום כיפור Who will rest and who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? Who will be humbled and who exalted?
בראש השנה יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יכתבון.
בראש השנה יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יכתבון.
180.
ותשובה ותפילה וצדקה מעבירין את רוע הגזרה.
But through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree. Please rise. We're on 184.
נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו, בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה, ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. אדירה, אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו, מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ. ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. אחד אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו, והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם. אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור, hallelujah.
May be seated.
לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיגות לך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיגות לך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיגות לך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש וקדוש אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני המלך הקדוש.
Amen.
189 at the bottom. By its mere existence, Judaism is a never silent protest against the assumption of the multitude that force is superior to truth. Join me. Just because it was always a minority, Judaism has become a standard of measurement of the law of morality. How the Jewish community has been treated by the nations among which it has lived is always a measure of the extent to which right and justice have prevailed. For the measure of justice is always its application to the few. It requires religious courage to belong to a minority, such as Judaism always has been and always will be. For many days will come and go before the Messianic time arrives. So that sense of being a big tent which welcomes in those of us with different perception who may not be able to hear the cantor's splendid voice, but can still connect to prayer through other means. The permission we give ourselves to remain seated if standing is hard. Whatever ways that we find, we're all a minority. We're all strange. I try to cover it up, but we're all in some minority. And Judaism gives us the courage to hold that and claim that. We're on 192, I believe.
ובכן צדיקים יראו וישמחו וישרים יעלוזו
190.
וחסידים ברינה יגילו וחסידים ברינה יגילו ובכן צדיקים יראו וישמחו וישרים יעלוזו וחסידים ברינה יגילו וחסידים ברינה יגילו ועולתך תקפוץ פיך וכל הרישה כולה כעשן תכלה כי תעביר ממשלת זדון מן הארץ.
Now 192.
חתימה.
קדוש אתה ונורא שמך, אין אלוהי מבלעדיך ככתוב. ויקבע אדוני צבאות משפט, והאל הקדוש נקדש בצדקה. ברוך אתה אדוני, המלך הקדוש.
Amen.
194.
אתה בחרתנו מכל העמים, אהבת אותנו ורצית בנו, ורוממנו מכל הלשונות, וקידשנו במצוותיך, וקרבתנו מלכנו לעברותיך, ושמך הגדול וקדוש עלינו קראת. ותיתן לנו אדוני אלוהינו, באהבה את יום הזיכרון הזה. יום תרועה מקראי קודש זכר לציאת מצרים.
194 at the bottom in English. In your love, eternal God, together you have given us this day of remembrance, a day for the shofar's joyful sound, a day of sacred assembly, a day to be mindful of our people's going out from Egypt. 196.
Together. Our God and God of all the generations before us, may a memory of us ascend and come before you. May it be heard and seen by you, winning your favor and reaching your awareness, together with the memory of our ancestors, the memory of your sacred city, Jerusalem, and the memory of your people, the family of Israel. May we be remembered for safety, well-being, and favor, for love and compassion, for life and peace on this day of remembrance. Stand briefly. We are about to do a special bracha, so stand up so you can catch it. Sometimes it's hard to catch things when you're seated. Eternal our God, remember us.
Amen. Be mindful of us. Amen.
Amen.
And redeem us for a life of goodness and blessing. Amen.
208. I think. And you can be seated.
ותהל ליבנו לעבדך באמת, כי אתה אלוהים אמת ודברך אמת וקיים לעד. ברוך אתה אדוני מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל, מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל, מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל, ביום הזיכרון.
Amen.
So as you listen to the words of Ritzeh, just imagine your prayers rising up and being accepted, whatever is in your heart at this moment, your prayers for the coming year.
Carried on the winds.
Exactly, the wings of angels.
Ritzeh Adonai Eloheinu be'amecha Yisrael ותפילתם באהבה תקבל ברצון ותהי לרצון תמיד עבודת ישראל ישראל עמך אל קרוב לכל קוראיו בני אל עבדיך וכוננו שפוך רוחך עלינו ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון ברחמים ברוך אתה אדוני המחזיר שכינתו לציון 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 לציון.
Amen.
210. Please join me. God, who is ours, God of all generations, to you we are grateful forever. Rock and protector of our lives, your saving power endures from age to age. We thank you and tell the tale of your praise,
your power in our lives, your caring for our souls, the constant miracle of your kindness.
Morning, noon, and night.
We
call you goodness,
for your compassion never ends.
We call you mercy,
for your love has no limit. We call you hope, now and for all times.
2:12.
וכל החיים בדוח הסלה והללו את שמך ויאמר האל ישועתנו ועזרתנו סלה ברוך אתה אדוני הטוב שמך ולך נאה להודות.
Amen. 2:14, rising if we're able for the priestly benediction.
אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו בברכה המשולשת הכתובה בתורה האמורה מפי כהנים עם קדושך כאמור. יברכך אדוני וישמרך.
May God bless you and keep you.
יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך.
May God's radiance enfold you and be gracious to you.
יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום.
May you be granted the ultimate blessing, which is the blessing of wholeness, the blessing of peace. You may be seated. 2:16.
שים שלום, שים שלום, שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך. שים שלום, שים shalom. At the bottom in the gray. בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה. ניזכר וניכתב לפניך. אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל לחיים טובים ולשלום ולשלום. ברוך אתה אדוני עושה השלום.
Amen. So we are transitioning now to our Torah service, which is going to begin with Avinu Malkeinu. We'll open our sweet little portable ark over here. Look, the sun is shining right on the Sefer Torah. And then once we've completed Avinu Malkeinu, I'll don a mask and put the Torah in the hands of Ivan Hand. No warning there, but in honor and celebration of your birthday this past week. It's a mighty thing to have a birthday on the same week of
the birthday of the world.
Of the birthday of the world. There you go. It's a good omen. Okay, so 2:23. Rise if we're able. If we're not, rise in spirit.
Avinu Malkeinu Shema Koleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and Merciful, hear our voice.
Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you.
Avinu Malkeinu Chamol Aleinu Ve'al Olaleinu Ve'tapenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and our families.
Avinu Malkeinu Kaledeve V'cherev V'ra'av Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger.
Avinu Malkeinu, kale kol tsar umastin me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror. Avinu Malkeinu, kotvenu b'sefer chayim tovim. Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names into the book of lives well lived. Avinu Malkeinu, chadesh aleinu shana hatova.
Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness.
Avinu Malkeinu, chonenu va'anenu ki ein banu ma'asim. Asei manu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu.
Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
Avinu Malkeinu, chonenu v'anenu. Avinu Malkeinu, chonenu v'anenu, ki ein banu ma'asim. Asei manu tzedakah v'chesed. Asei manu tzedakah v'chesed ve'oshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, chonenu v'anenu. Avinu Malkeinu, chonenu v'anenu, ki ein banu ma'asim. Page 228. Adonai, Adonai, El Machum v'chanun, Erech apayim, v'rav chesed v'yemet, notzer chesed le'alavim, nosei avon v'afesha, v'chata v'nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'chanun, Erech apayim, v'rav chesed v'yemet, notzer chesed le'alavim, nosei avon v'afesha, v'chata v'nakeh.
Last time.
Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'chanun, Erech apayim, v'rav chesed v'emet, notzer chesed le'alafim, nosei avon v'afesha, v'chata v'nakeh.
Shema
Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'norah Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'norah Shemo. Gadlul Adonai iti, uneromema shemo yachdav. Lecha Adonai hagedula ve'agevora ve'atiferet ve'hanetzach ve'hahod.
There is no processional to remain COVID safe. Maybe that is obvious. I don't know, but I'm making it very hard for the cantor to sing. You may be seated. Okay.
Actually, trying to listen to what you were saying was what was making it hard. I was trying to listen. Where are we?
Okay, so we're going to be reading the Akedah, the challenging reading that we avoided yesterday.
Michael,
Yeah.
Michael, going to bring it out? Do you want me to move it?
We're going to do a Torah cam for those who may be watching virtually. So giving our valiant ASLer, what's your, a little break.
So we have again our
Need a mic.
do I? Here, no, hold on a second. Yeah, I'm not going to use the mic. Hold on.
But then people at home can't hear.
Hold on.
'Kay.
Move, Michael, you're going to put put it right here. No, but hold on a second. Just hold on.
If you were wondering about the magic behind the technology, this gentleman is what made it all happen yesterday and today.
Yay, Mike.
This is the 500-year-old Torah. Tara's going to offer we're going to have 3 aliyot, and she's going to, there'll be creative aliyot, and so bunches of you can come up at small groups.
Actually, you're going to stand in place, I think. Sorry, that's what I'm going to do to keep it safe.
Plenty more opportunities to see it, and it's going to be sitting again right on the Torah scroll.
As we did yesterday, Mayor is saying we're going to rest this ancient Torah on top of the other scroll.
Oh, I see.
Or not.
Are you going to follow in the...
Oh, I see. All right. Why don't we the first one? You'll do it from. You're right.
I'm going to do it from...
So as clergy is getting situated, which is challenging,
Okay.
always, not a criticism. The Torah reading itself is on page 240 if you want to follow. And the brachot will be doing various creative communal aliyot, as we like to do on the second day. The brachot are on 230, so maybe you can sort of keep a little thumb in there. So we'll be sort of flipping between 230 and the verses that begin on 240. So for this first aliyah, I'm thinking of this sweet, amazing child came up to me, Jack, of course, and we were talking about tashlich and giving things up and letting things go, and this letter that this teacher wrote to me that was so challenging, and he said, Rabbi Tara, I think that's one crumb that you're never going to throw away. I was like, oh, I have a whole bag full, I promise you, of grudges. But maybe there is some schmutz in the recesses of your purse or your pocket or your soul that you know you would rather not bring into the new year. Maybe you're not sure. Maybe you think it might follow you and whisper in your ear. But if there's some kind of, this is all private. No one's confessing anything. Between me, myself, and I, what is some little something that I want to leave safely ensconced in 5781? And I do not want to bring into the new year. And so this aliyah, you can just stand in place with some intention for that. And if nothing comes to you, you can stay seated, or you can do it without standing. But if you feel moved to set your sights on something that you know you don't want to bring into the new year, please rise now.
Even if you can't think of it, but you have a sense there might be some piece of schmutz.
No judgment for the sitters, okay? Are we ready to roll when we get there? Yeah. Okay, cool. So, thinking of that which we are leaving behind.
So maybe you rise for all of them, but go on, sorry.
Okay. Together, 2:30. Baruch hu et Adonai hamborach.
Baruch Adonai Barak Leolam Vahed.
Baruch Adonai hamborach leolam va'ed. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol hamim. V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch ata Adonai noten haTorah. Can I help?
Amen. Vayehi achar hadvarim ha'ele v'ha'Elohim nisa et Avraham vayomer elav Avraham vayomer hineni vayomer kach na et bincha et yechidcha אשר אהבת את יצחק ולך לך אל ארץ המוריה והעלהו שם לעולה אל אחר ההרים אשר אמר אליך וישכם אברהם בבוקר ויחבוש את חמורו ויקח את שני נעריו איתו. Thank you. Yeah. אותו את יצחק בנו ויאבק עצי עולה ויקום וילך אל המקום אשר אמר לו האלוהים ביום השלישי וישא אברהם את עיניו וירא את המקום מרחוק ויאמר אברהם אל נעריו שבו לכם פה עם החמור ואני והנער נלכה עד כה ונשתחווה ונשובה עליכם. זהו?
All right, closing bracha as we release our crumbs into the water. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. May be seated. So that was sort of a looking over our shoulder aliyah. Does anyone have something they'd like to offer? This one could be out loud for the present moment, something that's going on in your life right now that you just want to celebrate and acknowledge. Something wonderful and joyful. We get plenty of bad news, but just shout it out through your mask.
My 2 new grandchildren.
Twins. The photo on Facebook of you holding these 2 babies at a bris is just beyond belief. New life.
My twin grandchildren who just became 21.
Whoa, we just journeyed. That was like whiplash. That's amazing. Anything else? That's enough. We could begin and end right there. Yes.
I have a great-grandchild coming in 3 more months.
Wow, and grandchildren yet to be. So that's one more. Oh, excellent. Yes. I feel like a game show host.
This one I'm dedicating to you, Tara, because our daughter is doing very well these last couple of weeks. I just want to...
So beautiful. So returning to health of body and spirit and gaining strength, being with those with whom we love through the ups and downs and seeing them go into the up. That's amazing news.
Both my daughters have boyfriends this year.
Oh, both daughters have boyfriends. Okay, so in celebration, you can remain seated, but let's just offer the second series of blessings, celebrating the joy and the goodness of this moment. We know there's a lot of work, but let's take stock. So important. 2:30. Baruch hu et Adonai hamborach, Baruch Adonai hamborach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. 1 verse 6. Oh, okay. Amen. Vayikach Avraham et atzei haolam vayasem al Yitzchak beno vayikach biyado et ha'esh ve'et ha'ma'achelet Vayelchu shnehem yachtav, and they walked together on their way. Vayomer Yitzchak, and Yitzchak said, El Avraham Aviv, Vayomer Avi, and exactly, Dad said, yeah. Vayomer Hineni,
Beni, here I am, son.
Vayomer, and Abraham said, Hine, or Isaac said, Hine ha'esh ve'a'etzim ve'ayeh hasel olah. Vayomer Avraham Elohim yireh lo hasel olah. And Abraham said to Isaac, God's going to find for us the seh. Don't worry. Vayelchu shnehem yachdav, and they walked together without saying anything. Vayavo el hamakom asher amar lo ha'Elohim, vayiven sham Avraham et hamizbeach, vaya'aroch et ha'etzim. Abraham built the mizbeach, the altar. Vaya'akod, and he tied et Yitzchak beno, Isaac his son, vayasemoto, and he placed him al mizbeach, on the altar, mima la'etzim, with the wood. Vayishlach Avraham et yado,
And Abraham took his son in his hand.
Vayikach et hama'achelet, and he took as well the knife, lishchot et beno,
to sacrifice his son.
or maybe it's not exactly sacrifice. Lishchot might remind you of the shchita, the butcher shchita. Maybe that's different from actually. It is different. Vayikra elav malach Adonai min hashamayim, and then an angel from heaven, God, the angel of God came from heaven. Vayomer, and the angel said, Avraham. Exactly. Vayomer, and Abraham said,
Hineni.
Here I am. Vayomer al tishlach yadcha Elana'ar, don't send your hand towards the boy. Ve'al ta'as lo me'uma, and don't what? Don't do anything.
Don't do anything.
And to harm him. Ki ata yadati, ki yareh Elohim ata velo chasachta et bincha et yechidcha mimeni. Avraham et einav vayar v'hinei ayil ahachan echaz basva karnav vayelech Avraham vayikach et ha'ayil vaya'alehu le'olah tachat bano vayikra Avraham Shema makomahu Adonai, and Abraham named this very spot. God will see and will show. Last clause. Behar Adonai.
Okay, the closing bracha.
Ruchata
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam.
Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. And so for this last aliyah, we tried to frame. One more? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We tried to frame the shofar service at the end yesterday as this call to action. So many issues cascading down upon our heads. Maybe every year, but I think it's worse this year. And maybe better also in some ways. So as we rise for this last aliyah, I want you to be thinking about one cause to which you are called to do some holy work, to do some tikkun olam, to do some fixing. There's a myriad of them, but try to think about one piece of tikkun, one piece of healing that you know you want to commit yourself to, even in the most modest way this coming year. Rise in body or spirit, page 230 for the bracha. Baruch hu et Adonai hamborach.
Baruch Adonai hamborach leolam vaed.
Baruch Adonai hamborach leolam vaed. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol amim. V'natan lanu et torato. Baruch ata Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayikra malach Adonai el Avraham shenit min hashamayim vahayomer bi nishpati neum Adonai ki yan asher asita et hadavar hazeh velo chasachta et bincha et yechidecha. I'm on verse 17, by the way. Kivarech avarechecha v'harba arbe et zaracha kechochvei hashamayim v'chachol asher al sifat hayam v'yirash zaracha et sha'ar oivav. Last verse. Vehid barachu bizaracha kol goyei haaretz ekev asher shamata bekoli elai. This is the last verse. Vayashav Avraham el nerav vayakumu vayachu yachtav el be'er shava. Vayeshev Avraham biver shava.
Okay, closing blessing. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nishbach l'tocheinu. Baruch ata Adonai Torah. So now we are going to bridge to Mishaberach. Leave the version on page 245. You may be seated. Yeah. Whatever you want, yeah.
Mishaberach avoteinu mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Those prayers for healing and strength, so needed for so many, on our lips. We get ready to raise the Torah. Spontaneity is the middle name of this service. And so, Grant, how do you feel about raising? You're very tall. We may hit the roof, but we'll spot you. Great. And for Torah dressing, Linda, will you help us dress the Torah? Thank you. We're on page 246. So, Yeah, and then you can just sit down in a chair, and we'll just don't trip on the pole. When the
As
Torah
the Torah's-
rises,
We rise.
we will rise.
Vezot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai beyad Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Morashat Kehilat Yaakov, Morashat Kehilat Yaakov, Morashat Kehilat Yaakov, Torah tziva lanu Moshe.
You may be seated. Okay, so we are now going to move to kind of an interactive teaching moment. Can I have one of them? Great. Okay, terrific. I made copies of about 50. I think I maybe did well. Yeah, thanks. So the question we're thinking about, and if you're able to share this on the live stream, Mike, that would be great. If you can't, it's okay too. The question we're thinking about is change. You know, when I think about the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, I think about a lot of things. You heard a very, visceral interpretation of this almost slaughter. We come around to this tale every year, and there's so much to discover about it. But I'm thinking about it this year as a paradigm for change, a way to think about change. What I tried to open up in my sermon yesterday was the idea about things we can shatter, things we can break, things we can maybe rewrite in a new way. And so this is just an opening quote to set us on our way. Sandy, would you read this one, The Truth?
The truth of the matter is that the power of change is the greatest innovation after the wonder of the creation of heaven and earth. Like many other Jewish thinkers, Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner.
His last name is not Huntner considered, thank God.
Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner considered change an act of self-creation.
Okay. So, wow, it's not only the world that was created, but in this time of Rosh Hashanah, we get to actually remake ourselves. But I think a challenge, that sounds really poetic and nice, but it's hard. There's all this internal resistance to change. Think of one habit that you have attempted to budge just a little one way, and it's, oh gosh, it's like rolling a boulder up a hill. So just a few little passages that reflect what we already know from our daily, from our experience, our yearly and daily experience. When doctors tell heart patients that they're going to die if they don't change their habits, only 1 in 7 will be able to follow through successfully. Desire and motivation aren't enough. So this is from some reputable source. Of course, it's from the internet. Even when it literally is a matter of life or death, the ability to change remains maddeningly elusive. I remember visiting a hospital. It was actually on our trip to Copenhagen. The people we were visiting, one was a nurse, and she took us into the ward where there was very intensive cancer treatment, and there was someone hooked up to an IV smoking, and not in critique of them, just of humanity, of what it means to be human. We just cling to those habits. This one, I'm sorry I made the font so small. It looked bigger on my screen. Someone feel like reading just a little bit of this? We're not going to go through every word. But there's something about we trust that which was. You know, the habit, well, that's got to be good. That's how we kind of think about it. Someone feel like reading one paragraph? Starting second box. It's not.
It's not just that people fear change, though they undoubtedly do. It's also that they generally believe, often on an unconscious level, that when you've been doing something a particular way for some time, it must be a good way to do things. And the longer you've been doing it that way, the better it is. So change isn't simply about embracing something unknown. It's about giving up something old, and therefore good, for something new, and therefore not good.
So I thought this was so interesting, this 2010 study. It just was saying, like, if you tell people that something has been done for longer, they're kind of into it. In one study, people who were told that acupuncture had been in existence for 2 millennia expressed a more favorable attitude towards it than those who were told it existed for only 250 years. There's multiple examples of this. I like the last one. In my favorite example, study participants were given a piece of European chocolate. It was described to them as having first been sold in the region either 73 years ago or 3 years ago. Guess which group rated the chocolate as better tasting, right? You know, it's the way they used to do it. So, of course, sometimes something being around for a while is an indicator that it's a good thing. You know, that's kind of one reason I'm into religion. I trust humanity enough to figure, well, if people have been doing this for a long time, there's something in it, you know? But longevity, there are habits that I have brought around with me for my 54 years that are not all good. And they're not just because they're entrenched doesn't mean that they're great. They're familiar. I cling to them, but that longevity does not necessarily mean something we should trust. Okay, turn the page. The weather's saying, make this teaching brief. So here, just a pretty image of the text we've just read. Probably every year as we go through it, there's something else that kind of jumps out at you. And maybe you can refer to it in our study. But this idea, it seems so radical. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're doing this on mics. People walking by on is this Nirvana? They can hear that we're talking about a dad killing his child. This is not good for the Jews. This is very, very shocking stuff in our scroll. But actually, if you turn to page 3, we have these texts both from Torah texts and actually from prophetic texts, which tell us something about child sacrifice in ancient society. So let's just go down just the English in the box, top box on page 3. Can I just pass this down? Just read one.
Do not allow any of your offspring to be offered up to Molech, and do not profane the name of your God. I am Adonai.
Okay, that's Leviticus. Don't offer your kids to Molech. Molech is obviously not Adonai. Keep going.
Anyone among the Israelites or among the strangers residing in Israel who gives any of his offspring to Molech shall be put to death. The people of the land shall pelt him with stones.
And I will set my face against that man, and will cut him off from among his people, because he gave of his offspring to Molech, and so defiled my sanctuary, profaning my holy name. Leviticus 23.
Be aware of being lured into their ways. You shall not act thus towards Adonai your God, for they perform for their gods every abhorrent act that Adonai detests.
Okay, so let's actually stop right there. And sorry, I hadn't finished. Finish that last troubling phrase.
Okay. They even offer up their sons and daughters in fire to gods.
So why am I bringing all this stuff to you? These are all Torah texts. What does this prove? Any reactions?
That we shouldn't do it.
Definitely that we shouldn't do it. What comes before that? the shouldn't. It proves that it was being done. I don't, say to my kids, brush your teeth, because I think they're going to brush their teeth. I'm speaking to that which they're not doing. Like if you're giving an injunction, it's because you're worried that it might not be followed, right? And Jeremiah says it too. For the people of Judah has done what displeases me, declares Adonai. They have set up abominations in the house called by my name and defiled it. They have built shrines of Topheth in the valley of Ben Hinnom and burnt their sons and daughters in the fire. So this idea of offering up your son as an olah in the fire, this is going on. We'd like to whitewash it. I think that's one thing that I really treasure about Torah is those nasty parts that we might want to put a little white out on there and say, well, we never did that. It's in there. The traces of it are there. Mel.
I never noticed before in Akidah, God says, don't do anything to harm that boy. As a parent, your responsibility, you got to think. Don't do anything, even though you think maybe you have good intentions.
Yeah, so when the text that was just so beautifully chanted, don't forget burning your kid. It said, don't do anything to harm your kid. And so it's not only like a refraining from sacrifice, but it's actually a caring for the child. So this whole text, that there's a little explanation here of what a topheth is, but let's turn. I decided to spring for y'all and make the color prints. Don't tell Stu Bot when it gets expensive. We hear about so up above you have in Tunisia. Here's an ancient site that has thousands of remains of infants. Pretty gruesome. But even much closer to home in Jerusalem, we hear about this valley of Hinnom. It's just outside the walls of the old city, and there they have also found these mass grave sites of that indicate that there was child sacrifice. So I think I've made my point. This stuff happened. We don't necessarily want to think about it so much, but it happened. But the Akedah, this text that we come around to every year on the high holidays, makes some sort of a change. Would someone take us out of this dreadful realm of child sacrifice to the top of page 5? New reader.
And he said, do not raise your hand against the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God. Since you have not withheld your son, you favored one from me. When Abraham looked up, his eye fell upon a ram, caught in a thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering in place of his son. And Abraham named that site Adonai Yireh, whence the presence saying, on the mount of Adonai there is vision.
So I guess before, don't look at all my questions, but I guess I make this mistake often. I sort of gave my answer. I think maybe the Akedah is a story about radical change, because the two came down the mountain. But maybe it's not. I'm curious, do you feel like this story that we circle around back to year after year, this moment on the mountain, is a story that shows great change in Abraham, in Jewish culture, or is it one that says, no, and there's not a lot of change here? Any thoughts on that? Up front, first Len, and then Sam.
Yeah, I'm a skeptic.
I love that about
you. God tells Abraham to do something, so he does it. And then God says stop, so he stops. Abraham doesn't have agency here, except to the extent that he's obeying God. And, it must have been a hell of an awkward walk back, right? We don't have Isaac's voice here, aside from, asking, where his father is, which is the $1,000,000 question, right? I mean, seriously, like Seder's from then on must have been awful. Like, to me, this is, I mean, as much as this is, yeah, sure. So like, it's a wound in the family. It's a silencing of the victim, and yeah, I mean, like, Leonard Cohen wrote a song based on this in the '60s, and it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, sure, great. Well, old people sacrifice young people, and that's what happens. And yeah, no, it's written so perfectly. It feels like Hitchcock. It's just this incredible suspenseful sequence written to maximize the horror of it, and it lands. So yeah,
What's interesting is that
yeah,
we know that that Isaac spends a lot of his time wandering the fields and not talking to Dad, but what's interesting is that he doesn't resist, and he doesn't resist. He goes along with this whole ploy, and we think of him as Hana'ar, the boy, but in truth, by this point, Isaac was probably a grown man. He probably could have overpowered his dad if he wanted to. So he was complicit in his own almost death.
But Abraham doesn't tell him until the last minute. It's not like he says, "Hey Isaac, get yourself psyched up for this."
I think he's got to figure it out. I would say differently. He says, "Hey Dad, I see you've got the fire and the wood and the knife, but where's the seh? Where's the animal that we're going to sacrifice, Dad?"
So we see maybe not only a lack of change in the monotheistic, first Jew, there's no change in Abraham, and maybe there's a certain kind of even entrenched submission in the son. So this is a narrative about lack of change.
I'm looking at this. I'm listening to this story this year in a different way, in light of Black Lives Matter and all that we are being compelled, I believe, and most of the institutions that we're part of are being compelled to acknowledge the institutional racism, the horrors of slavery more than we have before, and do something about it, and be honest about what our country has really, how our country has really behaved. And I think that this Akedah, tells us that any of us, even Abraham, even the first Jew, could be, behaving in a heinous manner, and yet we want to honestly look back on that, acknowledge it, and do what we can to make sure that our behavior is the absolute opposite.
So really seeing the who is sacrificed in the observance of our normal lives as we go along our way. What kind of sacrifices? I'm going to let you have the last word.
Okay, so I'm going to offer something very different. You spoke about change, and reading this now with a different perspective, maybe it was God who changed. Maybe God saw the earnestness in Abraham, and then he changed, and he stopped everything. But he was, the person, the being that said, this isn't right, and this is a pious man, this is a pious child, we shouldn't do this anymore. And maybe God made the change.
So profound. Okay, so don't worry, there's more we'll just pick and choose from these next little bits of text. So if the theme is change, potentially even God's change, one more question I want to ask before we dive into our final text is how, perhaps in the context of the Akedah, or perhaps just in your own life experience, what enables, let's keep with the personal. Societal change is a whole other thing related to the personal, God knows. What in your experience, and you don't have to give us long stories, but like tools, what enables you to change? or have you had an experience where you made a change? What was something about what inspired, what enabled, what made you be able to shift? Are you speaking? No.
Hitting bottom.
Hitting bottom. When you realize you're holding a knife over your son, you're like, oh, whoa, okay. So there's something about coming to the end. Actually, I really think that's a little bit what Yom Kippur is designed to do, to take us to the edge of the edge of the edge when we're breathing our bad breath through our mask, and we were like, whoa, I am human. I am so human. So something about hitting an edge, that's the wake-up call. Any other things that might enable you, in your own experience, have enabled you to do something different?
I was thinking about the tension between two ideas. One is, these two almost mutually exclusive or contradictory approaches. Change only happens through tiny little steps. Just a little tiny tweak in something I do or something I feel. That's one perspective. But then there's another perspective, which is, in order to really change, I need a big vision. I need to, it's not a time for small stuff. So that's what I'm in that tension.
I was hoping you'd say that. Okay. So we're going to look through some of these texts, and I want you to think about, either as it relates to your own life or through the Akedah, is it better to make change by being like, I am not going to eat processed sugar for the entire year? Or, and I'm not making that could be, or is it saying, okay, I'm going to, only have one scoop of, is that, which, I mean, it probably varies with the person, the moment, whatever, but hold your thought. I'm sure I want to hear it, but I want to go through a few of these texts. Just a few examples of big radical ways to make change, or maybe little ways of change. And who knows which the Akedah is. Maybe the Akedah proves you got to inch. You got to schlep your kid up the mountain before you realize that it's maybe not a good idea. Or maybe the Akedah represents a radical break, a radical departure. The jury's still out there. So we have, sort of hearkening back to Sandy's remarks, we have MLK and his dream that we could live in a world where we're judged by the content of our character. Big, big prophetic vision. Why do I still cry when I listen to his voice? That's example of radical departure. And even Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin said, if you want to make a change, this is at the bottom of page 5, you can maybe, do the details later, but when you first are initiating a change in your life, you got to go bold. You got to go big. You got to, you really got to go. And then, then maybe you can be a little more moderate. But when we're dealing with the Yetzer Hara, when we're dealing with things in our lives that need change, you can't just be doing little details. You got to go, okay. I mean, really, that's what this that we're about to hear very soon, I promise, is about saying no more child sacrifice. No more. Big change. We're just going to do other animals. It's not veganism yet, but maybe it's moving in that direction. Okay. So this is an amazing, it's actually, I have the link here to YouTube. This is Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor, man's search for meaning, and he is giving this lecture. And in my mind, this is a lecture about how you make big change. He's certainly someone who embodies that. Can I have a reader for this one? I'm going to sign.
You wouldn't believe it. Gray hair my age. I started taking flying lessons recently. You know what my instructor told me? If you're starting here, wish to get here. say east. But if you have a crosswind, you will drift and land here. Thus, have to do something called crabbing. Must head north of your real destination. Must head above your destination. You must aim higher in order to make your destination.
Hold on, Elaine. In other words, you're in New York, you're flying to Los Angeles. Do you aim yourself at Los Angeles or San Diego or Hawaii? What? Hawaii? Oh, sorry, I did San Francisco. Geography, she's brilliant, but not geography.
No, she just wants to go to Hawaii.
Northwest Island. So if you're going from New York to LA, you got to aim yourself. Go on, Elaine.
Okay. If you head here, straight ahead you will land here, lower. This holds for man, I would say. If you take man as he really is, we make him worse. If we seem to be idealist and overestimating man, looking at him that high, we promote him to what he really can be. So we have to be idealists in a way. Then we wind up as the true realists.
I want to just acknowledge that Sarah got it perfectly right. I mean, I can feel it, Sarah. She got it. She was like
It's really, this is a poor, it's really the if you, it's worth looking at. It's just, it's 4 minutes. And he basically says, you got to overshoot. You got to go big. You got to go far. And then maybe you'll be able to make the change or help someone else to change a certain way. Here's the opposite idea. During the Yom Kippur War, Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the memory of the righteous is a blessing, Menachem Ruchani of Yeshivat Ber Yaakov, and the author of Alei Shur traveled to Israel's border with Egypt to encourage the Israeli soldiers. Air Force pilots described to Rabbi Wolbe the best way for a pilot to avoid enemy fire was to fly low, which helped the plane remain undetected by enemy radar. Rabbi Wolbe saw this as a lesson for life. In general, by flying low, taking small steps, one can avoid the enemy radar. The Yetzer Hara, which thrives on derailing an individual from changing and growing. Indeed, one of the Yetzer Hara's tactics is to cause us to aim too high when trying to change. This often leads to failure, and cynicism results. Instead, one should take mindful, deliberate steps that can be easily integrated into one's life. So don't aim so high. That Yetzer is going to shoot you down. Pick a manageable goal, articulate it to yourself, and stick with it. Or as MLK said, if you can't do great things, I can do small things in a great way. So I think I'll just bring it home. The idea of being an Ivri, a Hebrew, is literally, it means one who crosses over the boundaries, who makes change. From Abraham's first call, he didn't stay there, he went there. And I think inherent in being on the spiritual path of Judaism is this notion of transformation. And maybe it depends on where we are in any given moment. Maybe some days we have to overshoot and make a radical departure. Maybe some days we just have to be like, okay, I'm going to put one foot in front of the other and I'm going to try to say the right thing through my grit teeth. And I'm going to, maybe, I think we have to have a lot of tools in our toolbox when it comes to transformation. But as Mayor taught this yesterday, when we say L'Shana Tova, Shana is of course year, but it's very closely related in the Hebrew and even in the sound to Shinui, Shoneh, Shona. Those are all words with the same root, really. I mean, there's one has an aleph, one has a hey, but to change. So maybe this year when we're saying L'Shana Tova, we're saying, let's make some good changes. And let's build on the good inside to make that change. And, you know, as troubling and challenging as the Akedah can be, in my mind, it brings us back to the possibility of transformation. Even though, for sure, we walked away from it with a bit of a limp. It's not a simple text. It's not without its trauma. But it does result in a society that looks a little different. Okay, I'm sorry I wasn't able to call on everybody, but it's late and I took up too much time. 8, 12. So we now are going to return the Torah to the...
Those are the winds of change.
Exactly. 276, rise if you can.
I'll take it.
Can I help? Okay.
יהללו את שם אדוני, כי נשגב שמו לבדו, הודו על ארץ ושמיים, וירם קרן לימו, תהילה לכל חסידיו, לבני ישראל עם קרבו, הללויה, הללויה. כי לקח טוב נתתי לכם תורתי, אל תעזובו, עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה, ותומכיה מאושר תרחיה דרכי נועם וכל נתיבותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם.
Let's be seated. I want to say one thing, Len. You know, your comment was you're kind of a skeptic, right? Maybe we remember what he meant by that. It was not a big deal on Abraham. He just first God said, "Go do it," then God said, "Don't do it." It's like whatever. So I actually, it's so profound because I'm guessing that God would take that kind of skeptic any day of the week. If I can just get that much from you, from us, Diane, it's enough. Just listen, even if you don't really get it or care that much. I mean, of course, if you deeply care, if you have a great vision, it's like, you're more of the Viktor Frankl perspective. You get it. You've got to make this enormous cultural change. Wonderful. But if you're also like, who's the other one, Tara? The guy who said, no, it's just small steps? Wolbe, right. Rabbi Wolbe, probably related to Rabbi Wolpe, but I don't know that. Anyway, I think, the Rambam and Hashem would take the skeptic as you've described Abraham any day of the week. All right.
As we bridge to the shofar service, one thing that I didn't say is that whether it was God's change or societal change or Abraham's change, they all, to me, were a result of listening. There was like a listening component. There was a receptivity. There was a hineni. Here I am, a call and a response. I think one of the primary ingredients for change, however it happens, is a response, is a being receptive to what's going on and responding in some way. And that is the mitzvah, the primary mitzvah. We've covered that up with a lot of talking in Torah and everything else, but if we want to get to the core of this holiday, it's lishmoa kol shofar, to hear the voice, so that we can change. So, page 202, the first series of brachot accentuate malchuyot, God's sovereignty. Wow, maybe even some sovereigns are capable of change, changing their mind. That's a good kind of a king. So, reading together, or actually, sorry, it's the cantor's turn to finally sing. We're on 202.
Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
203, awake you sleepers from your sleep, rouse yourselves from your slumbers, awake like Israel at the sea to the joyful song of Miriam and Moses.
Sing to the Eternal, for God has surged in triumph. The Eternal shall reign forever and ever.
Awake like Israel at Sinai to the dignity of being God's partners.
You shall be for me a holy nation, a sovereign community of priests.
Examine your deeds and return to God. Remember your Creator, you who are caught up in the daily routines, the habits, losing sight of eternal truth. You who waste your years in vain pursuits that neither profit nor save. Hear the rousing call to repentance.
With trumpets and the blast of shofar, raise a shout before the Eternal, the Sovereign.
Hear and know the truth of a higher power.
God is sovereign, robed in majesty. God is clothed with strength, so the world stands firm and cannot be shaken.
The blessings for shofar blowing are on 206.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehecheyanu v'kiyemanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Tekiah Shevarim Truah Tekiah Tekiah Shevarim Tekiah Tekiah Teruah Tekiah. At the bottom of page 207. Reshet Sefateinu Yerav Lefanecha Ram Benisa Ram Benisa Reshet Sefateinu Yerav Lefanecha Ram Benisa Mevinu Mazin Mabitu Makshir Lekol Kol Tekiyateinu Utekabel Berachamim Rachamim Uveratzon Seder Seder malchuyotenu.
208 at the bottom. Yeah, no.
Baruch atah Adonai, melech al kol haaretz, mekadesh Yisrael, melech al kol haaretz, mekadesh Yisrael, melech al kol haaretz, mekadesh Yisrael, beyom hazikaron. Page 263.
Zichronot, a messenger from another time, a stranger here in our midst. The shofar sounds remembrance.
Remember, wherever you go, I am with you.
After the flood, in the wake of destruction, Noah discovered the rainbow.
Alone on a mountain, a knife in his hand, Abraham heard the voice of compassion.
At the end of her strength, afraid for her child, Hagar found a well in the wilderness.
Remember, wherever you go, I am with you.
In sounding the horn, we summon them back. Zichronot, memories of those who saw signs of your presence.
A rock gives forth water, hope can blossom in the desert.
And when loving hands lighten our darkness, you are there.
When we are caught in the thicket, feel alone or forgotten, a shofar sounds remembrance.
From the deep well of the past, in the depths of our own despair, the shofar sounds remembrance.
Remember, my presence goes with you and will lighten your burden. 267.
262.
Whoops.
262.
We were.
Ki zocher kol hanishkachot atahu me'olam ve'en shichcha lifnei kisei kvodecha. Baruch atah Adonai. Zocher habrit on 267.
God of remembrance, remember the covenant of our ancestors. We reaffirm today. Remember, we are a people of noble ideas. Help us attain them. Join me. Remember all your people, all the nations on the road to peace. Bless their efforts. Remember with mercy the binding of Isaac, the sorrow of Sarah, Abraham's words, "Here I am." Our memory fades, but you remember all that we have forgotten. Your presence is a throne where all things matter and nothing is lost. Baruch atah Adonai, Zocher Habrit.
Amen.
268.
Tekiah, Shivarim Trua, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shivarim, Tekiah, Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah, Areshet Sefateinu Yerav Lefanecha El Ram Venisa, Ram Venisa Reshet Sefateinu Yerav Lefanecha El Ram Venisa. Mevinu mazin mabitu makshiv lekol tekiyatenu utekabel berachamim rachamim uveratzon seder seder zichronotenu.
We're on 284, preparing for those final blasts. I remember as a child, I was somehow in a car. I was driving by, and my mother was standing on the corner of a field filled with Canadian geese. And they were all honking, like hundreds of them at the top of their lungs. And she was standing there like this. And as a teenager, this was incredibly embarrassing. But this, I always think of that image.
She was honking like a goose?
She wasn't honking, but she was listening to the call. it was like that Mary Oliver poem. Read it. And it's this sound coming out of nature in full force, this calling from something that's beyond. So whatever image speaks to your heart as we prepare for shofarot, the final blasts that call us to our next migration, our next evolution, our next bit of change that our souls are being called to embrace. Baruch atah Adonai shomea kol truat amo Yisrael barachamim.
Amen. Tekiah. Shivarim Trua. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shivarim. Tekiah. Tekiah. Teruah. Tekiah Gedolah. Areshet Sefatenu Yerav Lefanecha El Ram Venisa Ram Venisa Reshet Sefatenu Yerav Lefanecha El Ram Venisa Mevinu Mazin Mabitu Makshiv Lekol Tekiah 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 Teino Tekabel berachamim Rachamim uberatzon Seder Seder Shoferoteinu.
Amen. All right. We'll offer Elenu and then Kaddish, and we will, right?
Yes.
All right.
Elenu on
286.
286.
Page 286.
Not.
That was Aleinu Gadol. It's part of Malchuyot.
Next year you're going to be here.
This is a many. This is the regular Aleinu. Yes. Yes. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol lateit kedula leyotze bereshit shelo asanu kigoyei ha'aratzot velo samanu kemishpechot ha'adama shelo sam chelkenu kohem וגורלנו ככל המונם ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל ושכינתו זו בגופי מרוהים הוא אלוהינו אין עוד אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו ככתוב בתורתו וידעת היום וישבות אל לבבך כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד page 288 ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
May be seated. So one of these shofar series was named for memory. These seasons are always ones of memory in poignant and maybe painful ways, beautiful ways. If there's any name you feel moved to offer for any reason, whether you're at home or here with us as I scan the room, please rise and say that name and remain standing.
Ben Devorah. Ben Yehuda and the Devorah.
If it's your custom to rise for Kaddish, you may do so now. We're on 292. Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
V'yalma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chaye d'chol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uvizman kari v'imru.
Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'alam u'lomei almaya.
Yitkadal
Barach
v'yitshbach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudsha b'richu. Le'ela u'le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Damiran v'yalma v'yimru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring that to all of us here in this community, to the community beyond these walls, to the human family. Ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. We say one last time. Amen. You may be seated. You'll be relieved. All my announcements are on this tiny post-it note, so I will not go on too long. Remember, if you haven't done a teshuvah note, you can still put it in a little box, and we will put it in the Nevelson Bima. Come this Friday, 7 p.m. for a special. Of course, it'll be special. It's Shabbat, but it'll be also special because we're celebrating Judy and Elliot Rosenzweig as we send them on their way with so much love and appreciation. Just before that, we're having a brief service at 6 p.m. We're installing a plaque. There was a tree that was planted for families in our community who have lost children. It was 2 years ago it was planted. Letters were written to those children. The tree is flourishing. We're installing a plaque at 6 p.m. It'll be an intimate service, but anyone who wishes to join this group, 6 p.m. just before our 7 p.m. service. 9/11, Saturday, of course, 7 p.m., a brief Havdalah experience on the bridge next to the library. We'll be doing just a few reflective moments as we look over those waters and think of what 2 decades has wrought. And then before you know it, it will be Yom Kippur. Rabbi Davidson will be coming virtually or in person. We have a full, amazing chapel meditations. They'll actually be in the main sanctuary because the chapel's a little tight. But all the usual offerings will be there, and with many, many ways in. And then something happening every night of Sukkot. So just know the party doesn't end here. Anything else?
You did it, Rabbi Tara. You did it.
Right.
Yes, Linda.
Oh, thank you. It didn't make it onto the
Kever
post-it
Avot.
note. Kever Avot. So after our Havdalah, 11 a.m. at Beth Moses, we have our own, Temple Beth-El plot, and we'll
On Sunday.
on Sunday, the next day.
On the 12th.
On the 12th, that comes after the 11th. So if you'd like to come and think of those who are buried there, or just be part of a memorial service, it'll be about an hour. Thank you. Good catch.
So we close with Kiddush and Motzi on page 300.
I thought we were going to close on page 294 with blessing for the new year.
Ah, yes. Well, and then we
Hayom, 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 te'amseinu, amen. Hayom, 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 tevarcheinu, amen. Hayom, 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 tegadleinu, amen. Hayom, 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 tidrashenu letova, amen. Hayom, 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 tikvevenu lechaim tovim, amen. Hayom, 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 tishma shavatenu, amen. Hayom, hayom, ברחמים וברצון את תפילתנו, אמן. היום, 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 תתמכנו במינים צדקך, אמן.
Page 300, we close out with a Kiddush and Motzi.
No. All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Amen, amen. Diana, come. And make Motzi with us, Diana. Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Now take the one you touched, bring it back to your seat, and eat it.
Just take it.
Take both of them.
Take them
both
both off the tray.
Take it all.
Diana,
take the whole tray.
Just
take the tray.
Yeah, good.
All right.
Yes.
Amen.
All right. Yehi ratzon milpanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu shetechadesh aleinu shana tova mituka. Our God and God of our ancestors, eternal God of all generations, may your presence in our lives in this new year renew our spirits and renew our strength. May it be a good year. May it be a sweet year.
Amen. Amen, amen. Thank you for being here. If you can bring your Sidurim out with you, that would be amazing. Thank you, Sarah.
Yay.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow.
Leshana tova tikatenu. Leshana tova tikatenu. Shana tikatenu. V'techatenu.